I wanted to Shoryuken there, but
That's what they all say. Oh, dude in court is found guilty of money laundering and grand larceny, whatever larceny is. And he's like, I meant to Shoryuken there, as they're taking him away to drag him off to jail. I've got a story to tell you. It's a little long, but it's very funny. This happened last week. I got woken up by a call from a scammer, and I was like, yeah, you know what? I haven't gotten much sleep. I'm running on like 4 hours, but whatever. I'll waste a bit of this guy's time. He tells me that he is from the Publishers Clearinghouse, and that I won a prize of a weekly check of $7,000 for the rest of my life. So every week for the rest of my life, I will receive a check for $7,000 is the story that he is selling me.
that's a lot of money.
Yeah. So he tells me there is a registration fee that you need to pay of $489, and once you pay that, you will receive your prize. I'm like, awesome. How are we doing this? So first off, he starts asking me about like if I have Cash App and stuff like that, and I'm like, yeah, I have Cash App, and I know how to use it, and all this stuff. But for whatever reason, he immediately abandons Cash App and starts asking me if I know how to make a Western Union transfer, and I'm like, yeah, I know how to do that, and he's like, okay, great, go to go to like Walmart or something. And I was like, okay, the Walmart is a little far from here, but there's a Publix not too far away. And he's like, great, go to the Publix. So I'm like, okay, let me get ready. I start asking him about like, what the process was exactly for me to win this thing. Like, do I have to pay taxes on this prize money? He told me no. What was the selection process like? Did you just pull my name out of the hat? And he said yes, which sounds very professional. I'm sure that, every large, like, organization worth their salt, when selecting who wins their prizes, they all pick him out of a hat, for sure. So finally, I tell him, okay, I'm in my car. And he's like, okay, can you honk the horn on your car? And I was like, oh shit, okay, I don't have this ready to go. I don't have like a sound effect or anything ready for this. So I just pretend that like I can't hear what he's saying. I can't understand what he's saying. And I'm like, what?
Okay.
He's like, can you honk the horn? I'm like, I'm sorry, can you repeat that? You're like really quiet. And then the phone call ends, and I'm like, oh man, he got suspicious. He thinks, okay, he's not in his car. I'm not gonna, he's just trying to waste my time. I'm not dealing with this anymore. He calls me back, like a minute later, and he's like, hey, the phone got disconnected. And I was like, oh, okay. Yeah, I guess it did. And he completely forgets about asking me to honk my car horn, and is like, all right, go to the Publix. And I'm like, great, I got out of, having to honk my car horn. Awesome. So at this point, I'm sitting in my living room, and my mom is listening to me talk to this guy on the phone.
I was like, thank God I don't have to play Pikachu anymore.
Yeah, I noticed you were just kind of like spamming side B, just like mindlessly.
Yeah. This entire story it will just be tainted by the worst gameplay ever.
Yeah. Watch, you're gonna get Pichu now. So I get to the Publix, and I'm like, I'm at the Publix, I'm at the Western Union, or no, I'm in the parking lot. What do you want me to do now? Oops, that's unfortunate. So he says, I want you to make a transfer of $489 to this account, and then he gives me a name. I don't think I'll say like the full name because I have a strong feeling that the account was from a person that he has scammed before and like stole their account and was using it to launder money. I'll say their name was Tommy Whitaker. So I go into the Publix and I go over to the Western Union and I'm like, oh, they're using like this machine that like I've never seen before. So this might this might take a little longer. I'm not exactly sure how this thing works. And he's like, okay, that's fine. You know, take your time. I'm telling him like, oh, the machine is like asking for more information, or like I put the information in wrong and all this stuff. You know, just trying to waste more of his time. Finally, I tell him like, okay, I successfully sent the $489, and he's like, awesome. Get the receipt from the machine. Get the receipt that it prints for you. And I'm like, okay. So I get the receipt. I go back out to my car, and he's like, okay, read off of the receipt what the number is. So I just make up a bunch of random numbers. And he's like, okay, and the name that you put on there? And I said, yep, it's Tommy Whitaker with 2 Ks, just like you told me. He did not tell me 2 Ks. He specified 1 K was in this name. And I was like, yep, 2 Ks, just like you said. And he's like, no, you got the name wrong. And I'm like, what do you mean? You told me 2 Ks. And he's like, no, it's just 1 K. And I'm like, well, I don't know why you told me 2 Ks before then, David. By the way, I forgot to mention, he told me his name was David Fayer, so this is the saga of David Fayer. So he tells me I need to go back inside the Publix and get the receipt edited to be the right name. And I'm like, okay. So I go back inside the Publix, and I have him on mute on my phone for a few minutes, and then I get back on the phone with him, and I tell him, yeah, so I had to talk to like a proper like representative, like an actual person. At the Western Union. And she told me that when they edited the name to be correct, that it got flagged as suspicious in their system. And he's like, get out of there right now, because like, he's thinking like, oh no, this teller lady is gonna tell him that this is a scam. And I'm like, well, she went to go and consult her manager, and she told me to wait in the office for her. Do you want me to just, like, leave after she told me to, like, wait for her? And he's like, yes, get out of there right now. And I'm like, okay. So I leave, and I go back to my car, and he's in Plan B mode now. He's like, okay, the Western Union transfer is not gonna work. I need another, like, method to scam this guy with. So he tells me that he needs me to go to a different store and pick up a vanilla Visa prepaid gift card for $489. And I'm like, okay, there's a Walgreens that's not too far from here. I can go pick that up. Is that part of the like registration process? And he says yes. And I'm like, all right, I guess I'll go take care of that then. So I keep him on mute again for a few minutes. I get back on the phone with him, and I'm like, all right, I just got to the Walgreens, so what do you want me to look for again? And he's like, I want you to look for a vanilla Visa prepaid gift card. And I'm like, okay, a cherry vanilla Visa prepaid gift card. And he's like, no, not cherry vanilla, just regular vanilla. And I'm like, well, is the committee, like, picky about, like, what flavor it is? Like, I don't see what the big deal is. And he's like, no, it's called a vanilla Visa prepaid gift card. I'm like, okay. So I go into I go into the Walgreens, and I have him on mute again for a little bit, and then I get back on the phone with him, and I tell him, yeah, the clerk at the Walgreens has told me that I can't buy a vanilla prepaid Visa gift card with debit or credit card. And he said, okay, then pay for it with cash. And I'm like, David, I don't have $489 of cash, like, lying around in my pocket. Like, you know, what, you think I just carry that around with me wherever I go? And he's like, okay, go to the ATM. And I'm like, okay. So this is where I decide, you know what, I'm gonna let my mom, who's been listening to me mess with this guy, I'm gonna let her get in on some of the fun. So... So I'm like, I say to my mom, and I like put him on mute briefly, and I say to my mom, all right, you got to play the cashier. And she's like, okay. And like, so we're just gonna improv this. So I get back on the phone with him, so he's like unmuted, and he can hear my mom and I talking to each other now. And I say, excuse me, do you guys have an ATM in here? And my mom says, oh, we do, but it's out of service. It's down for maintenance. And I'm like, oh, okay. Do you know any places around here where I can find an ATM? And what my mom says next, I was trying so hard not to laugh while on the phone with this scammer. She says, yeah, there's an ATM over at the Publix. The Publix that I just left from. So I'm like, oh, cool. All right. So I go back in the car, and I'm like, hey, David. And he's like, yeah, I heard. Go to the Publix. And I'm like, all right, cool. So... So I drive back to the Publix, and I'm on mute again, and my mom is like, okay, so, like, what's the play from here? And I'm like, okay, so he told me to, like, leave that teller's office, right? So my plan is that when I arrive at the Publix, that the teller is gonna be there with a security guard, and when they see me, they're gonna be like, oh, that's the guy who ran out of my office. We need to talk to him, and, like, warn him that, like, something fishy's going on. My dad walks in the room, and I'm like, Dad, you gotta play the security guard. You gotta be the security guard. And my mom will be the teller. And, I, like, briefly explain to my dad what's going on. I get back on the phone with the scammer, with David, and I tell him, hey, David, I just got back to the Publix, so I'm gonna head in and, use the ATM. And he's like, okay, I just, I want to remind you, because you won this prize money, that there might be people who are, out to get you, to, like, claim your prize, or steal your prize from you. And I'm like,
yeah,
oh.
Cool, buddy.
Well, yeah, he just doesn't want me, like, talking to anybody and, like, being alerted to the fact that he's scamming me. So he's like telling me, like, don't talk to anybody because they're gonna try to steal your money from you. And I'm like, okay. So I go back in the store, and the clerk and the security guard see me at the ATM, and my mom is like, sir, why did you leave the office? I told you I would be right back. I just needed to go and talk to my manager. And I'm like, oh yeah, sorry, something urgent came up. And then my dad, who's the security guard, says, like, sir, could you come with us, please? We need you to come back to our office. And I'm like, did I do something wrong? Am I in trouble? And he's like, no, you're not in trouble. We just need to ask you some questions. We just need to, we're just conducting a little investigation. And then I'm like, oh, I see. And, like, David can hear this whole conversation. And I'm like, oh, I see. He warned me about you people. He warned me that there were gonna be people after me because of my money. You're trying to steal my money. And my dad is like, sir, please calm down. And I'm like, no, you're after my money. And then I'm, like, pretending to, like, run out of there and, like, book it out of there. And then I get back on the phone with David, and I'm like, David. And he's like, yeah, what happened? And I'm like, David, I think those people that you warned me about are after me. And he's like, no, it's fine. Just go back in the store and use the ATM. And I'm like, no, David, you don't understand. They wanted me to, like, go back and, like, answer questions and stuff. I think they were trying to steal my money, David. And he's like, okay, where are you right now? I'm like, I'm hiding in my car. And he's like, okay, don't worry, you're gonna be fine. As soon as you get this Visa prepaid gift card, they won't be able to steal your money. Like, until then, they might try to, like, steal your identity. But if you can get the card, you'll be safe. And I'm like, steal my identity? That's really bad, David. Like, that's, if they steal my identity, will they get my prize money? And then David says, yes, no, yes. He just can't make up his mind. And I'm like, all right. And he's like, so, okay, go back to the ATM. I'm like, David, I'm not going back in that store. I'm scared. I'm not going back in the store. And he's like, okay, is there another store you can go to? And I'm like, there's a Target, but it's a little far away. And he's like, all right, whatever, just go to the Target. And I'm like, okay. So I go to the Target, and I'm on mute with him for like 10-15 minutes. And by the way, I just want to mention I hadn't up until this point, but occasionally, throughout this entire conversation, I would just randomly hang up on him and make him think that the phone kept getting disconnected. And every time he called me back, I would say, like, he would be like, yeah, we got disconnected again. I would say, yeah, it's like snowing out right now. I think that's probably messing with the connection. Every time I would say that. I imagine that, like, by the end, he was so sick of hearing me say that. Just every time he gets back on the phone.
How long were you in a call with him for?
In total, it was 4 hours of this guy's time that I wasted. I was so proud. Oh man, so I arrive at the Target, and I'm like, okay, I gotta give this guy like a little bit of a win to like keep him on the hook here. So I'm like, all right, I'm gonna tell him that I successfully got money from the ATM without any issues. And he's like, okay, awesome. And then he's like, oh, do they have vanilla Visa gift cards at the gift card rack at the Target? So I go over to the Visa or the gift card section, and I'm like, no, I'm not seeing anything there. I'm seeing stuff for like Olive Garden. I'm seeing stuff for Steam.
No, what you should have done is be like, yeah, but they don't take cash.
That would have been really funny. Yeah, they only take check, and I left my checkbook at home. Yeah.
I just withdrew my money from my account. You want me to go put it back in?
Oh my gosh. It's like this guy was on the phone with me for 4 hours for $489. I'll remind you. Like that's not a lot of money. But yeah. I imagine he was probably gonna try to like steal like some of my bank account information too. So you know he was gonna get a little more out of it than just $500, but still. So anyways, I tell him like, nah, there's like Olive Garden and like Steam and TGI Fridays, and he's like, all right, you know what, forget it, just go back to the Walgreens. And I'm like, okay. So I'm headed back to the Walgreens, and I'm like, you know, he thinks I'm driving, and I'm on the phone with him, and I'm like, oh man, it's starting to get a little late. I haven't had lunch yet. I'm starting to get pretty hungry, and he's like, you just buy a snack or something at the Walgreens. And I'm like, oh, that's a great idea. Yeah, just like get a candy bar or a bag of chips or something.
And then you won't have enough money to buy the gift card.
I'm like, yeah, that's a great idea, David. And I'm like, that must be why you're working at the Publishers Clearinghouse, because you're a pretty smart guy. You know, you're always thinking. You're real sharp. I don't know, like where you're based, like what time it is for you, but must be getting to be lunchtime for you too, right? And he says, no, it's not lunchtime for me yet. I'm like, oh, okay. Do you have lunch like late? And he's like, yeah, I have lunch at like 3 o'clock. And I'm like, wow, I don't know if I could go until 3 o'clock. I don't know if I could go until 3 o'clock without having lunch. And then he says, yeah, throughout the day I just like to snack on some nuts. And then I said, oh, snack on these nuts? And he's like, he goes, what? And I'm like, huh? So then I'm like, all right, so when you do have lunch, what do you usually have? You have like McDonald's or something? And then he said, no, I'm not a huge lover of chicken. And I'm like, okay, so like you hate chicken? He said, no, I'm just like not a huge fan of it. I'm like, okay, I mean, you know that they sell like more than chicken at McDonald's, right? And he's like, yeah, but like, I mean, sometimes I'll have McDonald's, sometimes I'll just have like a hot dog or something. And then I say, oh, I don't really like hot dogs, I'm more of a sandwich guy myself. Is a hot dog a sandwich? And he says, yes. And I say, what? No, it isn't. And thus ensues like a 10-minute argument with this scammer over the phone about whether or not a hot dog is a sandwich. I could not believe that this shit was happening as it was happening. I was like, there's no way that I'm actually having this conversation right now. And, I just noticed you got Pichu. Here, let me free you from your pain. So I'm like, no, a hot dog's not a sandwich. And he's like, yes, it is. And I'm like, no, a sandwich is like it's like something between 2 slices of bread. A hot dog bun is like one continuous slice of bread that's like wrapped around the hot dog. And so it's not a sandwich. And he's like, yes, it is a sandwich because it's on bread.
Technically speaking, the hot dog is the sausage itself and not the sandwich part of it.
Yeah, so you agree with me then?
Well, I agree that the hot dog isn't a sandwich. However, a sausage sandwich, which is when you put the hot dog between bread, that would be a sandwich.
All right. Well, what he and I are arguing here is whether or not a hot dog on a bun is a sandwich. And my stance...
I would call that a sandwich.
My stance, both in and outside of this story, is that a hot dog is not a sandwich. But go off, I guess. And so then I'm like, all right, so if all it takes is for something to be on bread, a tortilla is like technically bread, so is a burrito a sandwich? And he's like, do you like burritos? And I say, yes, but that's not what we're talking about here.
Is pizza a sandwich?
Yeah, exactly. Is pizza a sandwich, personally? I don't think it is. I don't think that's even a hot take. I got 3 stocked. My goodness, I'm not very good with Mario. I
just have used big dumb hitboxes.
Sir, this is a recorded line. I can't discuss this kind of stuff with you. I'm like, oh, okay, you can't argue about You know what? Fair. I respect it. I'm like, okay, so you can't argue with the clients while on a recorded line. And he's like, no. And I'm like, oh, okay. So he says, are you getting close to the Walgreens? And I say, it's right across the street. I'll be there in just a second. And he's like, great. I pull into the parking lot, and he just wants to, remind me what it is I'm getting, just to make extra sure that I get this Vanilla Visa prepaid gift card after all the bullshit that I've put him through to get it. And I'm like, yeah, no, I got it. Don't worry. I leave my phone, quote unquote, in the car, and I go into the store, and I come outside. Hey, David, I got the card. And he's like, all right, great. What was the amount for? And I said, $489, man, just like we talked about. And he says, awesome. What was the fee on it? Because I guess there's like a little fee that you have to pay in addition to like whatever money you're putting on the card. And I did not know how to answer this question. I didn't know like what number would be suspicious to him or not. Like if I said something like, that was too high, that he'd be like, nah, you're fucking with me. And if I said something too low, he would say, nah, you're fucking with me. So I purposefully said, yeah, the fee was 4T. So that way, if he says 40, I could be like, no, it's 14, stupid. He'd be like, oh, okay. And if he was like, 14, that's too low, then I could be like, no, it's 40. So I purposefully, like, said it in, like, a vague way.
Nice.
Yeah, that exact thing happens where he says 40, and I said, no, 14. And he goes, 14? You had to pay $14? And I'm like, oh shit, 14 is, like, still too much. So then, thinking quick, I'm like, well, I took your advice and bought a snack in there as well. Like I got a soda and some chips. And so on the receipt it says like that aside from the $489 that I spent, that it was $14. And this is deemed an acceptable answer by David. And he's like, oh, okay, cool. So take the card out of the package. I'm like, okay. So I take the card out of the package, and he says, now there's going to be some numbers on there, and you need to just read those numbers off to me. okay, so, like, do I give this card to the committee? Because he told me that there was going to be, like, a committee of people that were presenting me with my prize when I got back to my house. And he says, yes. And I say, great, so I'll just be on my way home. And he's like, no, you have to give me the card numbers. And I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna give the card numbers to the committee when I get home. And he says, no, you're not listening. He's like, you're not listening, Jimmy. I told him my name was Jim Browning, which, for anybody out there who enjoys a bit of scam baiting content on YouTube, Jim Browning is a master of taking down scammers. So he's like, no, you have to give me the card numbers. And I'm like, oh, I understand now. You're gonna be at my house when I get there. And he says, yes. No, I'm not gonna be at your house. And I'm like, okay, well, you told me I need to give these card numbers to the committee. And he says, yes, but, and I'm like, great, then I'll go home. And he's like, Jimmy, you're not listening to me. You need to give me the card numbers now. And I'm like, oh, you mean like, oh, okay, you want me to give them to you right now? And he says, yes. And I'm like, oh, okay. And so he's like, what are the card numbers? And I'm like, okay, gotcha. Let me see what they are here. And then I hang up on him. So then he calls me back, and he just skips the whole, Jimmy, we got disconnected, or hi, this is David, all that shit. He's just immediately like, what are the card numbers? Because he knows that, like, he's so close to, like, getting what he's spent these last 4 hours on. So he's just saying, what are the card numbers? And then I say, who is this? And then David says something that I imagine was not very nice. I didn't quite catch it. I don't know if he was speaking another language when he said it, or if he was just mumbling fuck you or something. But he said something that was not very nice, and then hung up the phone. And that was the last I heard of David Fayer. But my goodness, what an adventure I went on with him. I was, oh my gosh. I was overjoyed to have wasted 4 hours of this criminal's time. I hope after that phone call, he went and enjoyed himself a hot dog.